Welcome back to the channel, guys, and this is going to be a little bit different from what I normally do. So basically, on my Instagram channel, I posted something a couple of days ago about the new pamphlet that Sweden's just sent out to all its people, talking about what to do in times of war or crisis. Now, please don't get me wrong, this is not going to be fear-mongering, okay? This is just going to be observing what another country's done and talking about the bigger picture too, and maybe making people think a little bit about what they're going to do with their preparedness and how they're going to deal with those sort of things, okay? So please don't think I've turned into one of the other channels out there that just gives fear-mongering all the time and it's talking about scary stuff to try and make you buy things, because this isn't at all, okay? Now, in the UK, we got the UK Prepare site this year on the gov.uk website, which is, you know, it's a step in the right direction. A lot of people criticised that. I thought it was a good idea to at least get people thinking. It's pretty brief, there's not a lot on there, to be honest, but at least it's a step in the right direction. However, following recent events in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, then a lot of the countries, a lot of the Nordic countries are now stepping up their preparations because they think that they're under threat. You know, we've just reached the 1000th day in Ukraine, and that was marked by US ATACMS missiles being launched into Russian territory. Now, this is something that Putin has said that he sees as a multinational attack, i.e. a direct attack from America. That's a big development, and a lot of people, I think, are missing the point on this. It could be an escalation, you know, and I know Putin's constantly rattling his sabers and he's talking about use of nuclear weapons. I don't want to be that person sitting there going, I told you so. I think there is potential for this to go horribly wrong, and I just hope that our leaders are doing the right thing. And as we all know, you know, some of our leaders aren't the best, and I'm not going to start pointing fingers there either. But yeah, there's that. There's the communications cable that was cut between Finland and Germany, and you know, like I say, there's this threat from Putin talking about nuclear weapons all the time. It's not a good thing, okay? So the Nordic countries, anyway, talking about this subject that we're talking about, the Nordic countries, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and now Sweden, they're all increasing their efforts to prepare their people for the worst, basically. Preparing for potential crisis, for war, and other events, you know, so we'll talk about that as I go through the video. It's not just about dropping bombs, there's other stuff as well, which is actually, you know, if you think about it, it's a good thing. It's trying to make people think about what they do if something was to go wrong and how we're going to deal with it. So Sweden started distributing hard copies of their pamphlet this week on the 18th, talking about how to prepare for potential war and crisis. Finland's launched a new website. Norway's distributed millions of pamphlets with guidance on preparations for war, other threats and extreme weather. And Denmark's emailing out advice on managing up to 3 days worth of supplies for their people. So all those Nordic states that are fairly close to Russia are taking the threat seriously. And I think a lot of people, it's quite sad to say, but a lot of people in this country, in the UK, think that they're safe because there's that distance there. You know, if we was living closer to Russia, I think people would be a bit more serious about it. I think a lot of people are sticking their heads in the sand about it. So anyway, Sweden has recently joined NATO. Now that's a big deal, okay? Sweden joined NATO this year after several hundred years of being neutral, okay? It recently entered into a pact with the EU in 2009, so 15 years ago, which kind of was a step away from their traditional neutrality. But this year they joined NATO, which is a big deal, you know. It does two things. It gives them defence, because as a member of NATO, you know, attack on one is an attack on all, as they say. But it also makes them a target, doesn't it? because the Russians are like, well, now you're our enemy. Okay, so that step alone was quite a big deal, and that neutrality dated back to the early 1800s. So it's a long time, you know. So that's just a couple of things there to kind of set the tone for what I'm talking about here. These Nordic countries taking things a bit more seriously, and because it's on their doorstep, they feel as though they need to start informing their people. But it's quite a big deal, isn't it, when governments actually take those steps, because they're saying this is a reality now. And it's going to cost a lot of money to do it, especially when you're printing off hard copies and sending them to every household in the country. You know, it's not just a website, because they want their people to receive this information and then start acting on it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the website. I'm going to go to the Swedish website, and we're going to look through that pamphlet, and I'm just going to take a quick canter through it and talk through it and basically let you know what's on their website. So I'm now on the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency website, MSB obviously in Swedish. As you can see at the top here, you've got various tabs that you can open up, advice, things like that. Training and exercises, that's quite an interesting one there, and so on. At the very top then, this is obviously quite big news, it's a big announcement, a new version of the brochure in case of crisis or war. So they have done this before. Sweden and a lot of the Nordic countries are really good for their preparedness, a lot better than what we have in more Western countries. So good on them. But what it actually states is this Swedish version is going to be mailed, as in physically mailed, hard copy, to all 5 million households in Sweden over 2 weeks, beginning on the 18th of November. So that's something that, you know, that they're going to actually physically mail it. And then it says that it's also going to be sent to digital mailboxes, so emailed out after the printed version has been sent. So they're taking it seriously, and they're double tapping it. Coming down the page slightly, you've got quick links into various other things, taking part in the mission, about NATO membership, which is, you know, we're going to be talking about that in a minute. So some quite important stuff and news headlines here that you can basically read up on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out of this website now, because I've already downloaded this this pamphlet. As you can see here, you can download it, and you don't have to be signed up to the website or anything like that. It's completely accessible, which is amazing. You know, you don't have to be a Swedish resident or anything like that. I think it's really good that you've got complete access to it. So I'm going to come out of there now. And then what I'm going to do is open up the manual that I've already loaded. So front page then, in case of crisis or war. Now, that's quite a stark opening page, isn't it? I think if we had this in the UK, they'd fluff it up a little bit. It'd be a bit more touchy-feely, because people would have their feelings hurt and they go into panic mode reading that front page. I like the fact that it's a bit more direct, because it's not, you know, beating around the bush. So it's given a little bit of an intro here then. All residents of Sweden, we live in uncertain times. Hell yeah. It's saying about armed conflicts being undertaken in different parts of the world. And then it's talking about all the other different aspects as well. Instead of just the physical, it's talking about cyber attacks, disinformation, all that other sort of thing. And, you know, to your average person, we should know about all these things. A lot of people aren't paying a lot of attention though, and it's quite good that they're highlighting these things. And as we go through this brochure, it will basically talk about the different things instead of just the physical threat of war, which is quite good actually. So it's got your contents there, but if we just look over to the right hand side, in uncertain terms, it's important to be prepared. You know, you can't get a better statement than that. It was saying, you know, the threat levels are increasing. We've got to be prepared for the worst case scenario, and an armed attack on Sweden. Who would have thought you would have been reading that statement, especially off, you know, a government source? I'm not going to read through everything, but as it says there, the ultimate threat to our freedom. How sad is that? Okay, then, just some overarching statements then. Together we make Sweden stronger. And it says there, you know, we all need to contribute. That's a great statement right there. You know, instead of thinking someone else is going to do it, every person, you know, it doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, everyone can help with, the contribution towards defence, towards helping other people out, etc., etc. And it's saying about, here's some examples of how we can get involved in our collective preparedness, about joining defence organisations, complete a course in CPR or first aid in general, donate blood, talk to other people in your community, and about collective preparedness. Is something in the UK that we don't do very well, I think. So it's talking a bit about defence in Sweden, and it says there, Sweden in NATO. So only this year, Sweden's joined NATO, and it's for a good reason, isn't it? Because of the threats that they're facing and that we're all facing now. Okay, there, talking about a heightened state of alert. So, this is obviously in relevance, to what's going on in Ukraine. They're being in a heightened state of alert now, and they're concerned about the potential threats facing them. It says total defence duty, from the year you turn 16 until you turn 70, you're part of Sweden's total defence and required to serve in the event of war or the threat of war. I think that's a great statement, I think pushing it to 70 is possibly a bit too far, but, we're not just talking about picking up a rifle and, defending physically. We're on about contributing to the big effort. And if you're physically well enough, then why shouldn't you do that? And I think that's a great attitude to have. Okay, warning systems. Now, you've got public service announcement there. It's talking about, different ways that you can be warned, emergency alarms, and look at that air raid warning. How terrifying is that? If you ever did hear that for real and there was something inbound, that would be pretty terrifying, I watched the film Threads again recently. If anyone hasn't seen that, watch it. And that point in the film where you get the genuine air raid warning is absolutely terrifying. Imagine that. Okay, so it's got some advice here on seeking shelter during an air raid. And if you look at, I'm not going to read it all out, but if you look at the different levels on the right hand side there, it's basically just telling you, giving you a little bit of advice about how you can, protect yourselves and others, with just minimal protection at the top by getting into a ditch or a pit, all the way through to an actual civil defence shelter, which is going to give you the best level of protection you possibly get. But looking at the bottom left then, nuclear weapons, the sort of thing that nobody wants to talk about, but the threat is genuine, it's there. A little paragraph about it there, just a couple of comments, and that's a very complex subject, but they've obviously got to keep it brief as possible, otherwise the whole pamphlet would be about nuclear attack. Home preparedness then, next page. Really good stuff here. Again, a lot of it's common sense, but people that don't think about this sort of thing, it's not their thing. It's good to have some sort of advice on things that you can prepare, how to prepare it, and nudging people's thoughts towards doing something like this. So it's talking about water. Next page talking about heat, communication, and food. On the food side of things, it's breaking it down into the different categories, and how to actually prepare it. And then currency, something a lot of people don't think about nowadays because we're all used to using digital devices, phones, cards, and where it's saying about stocking up on currency, if things were to go wrong, then that would probably be something that you'd want to have, or definitely, in fact, because if all the electronic systems goes down, how are you going to start buying things? Next page then, toilet, something again a lot of people don't think about. How are you going to get rid of your waste? So it's talking about prepping stuff, things like toilet paper, wet wipes, etc., but also it's what it's doing is it's giving you a bit of a nudge again, a bit of a sort of thought process about what would you do, how would you get rid of your human waste, and a lot of that's situation dependent, isn't it? But at least what you want to be doing is having a little think about it. And it's got the other paragraph with everything else, just a few bits and pieces of essentials, things like your first aid kits, headlamps and stuff like that. Okay, evacuation then. So what we're talking about here is bugging out, isn't it? but in a more sensible phrase, evacuation. There is always going to be, not always, but there is a possibility where you can't actually bunker in anymore and you can't stay at home because of the situation that's developed. If your house is literally on fire, then you can't stay there, can you? So it's what it's doing is just giving you some advice on bits and pieces to bring, and some advice about the whole scenario. Next page is civil defence shelter. So they've got these built in Sweden, and what a great thing to have, what a great option to have, if things are seriously going to go wrong, to be able to escape to somewhere. And just a little bit of info about there, including the sign here that actually shows that premises are protected under laws of war. So going into more like less physical stuff now and more into the bigger picture, you've got psychological defence. So it's talking about different foreign powers using different means of trying to persuade and change and influence. So things like disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, as it used to be called in the old days, which is a big thing nowadays, especially with social media, and a bit of information about that, just things to think about. Digital security, which kind of links in with it, making sure everything's safe with your IT systems, etc. Just a few things to think about with that too. Okay, terror attacks. Now, obviously, there's different aspects to what can happen. It's not all just about nuclear bombs dropping on the country. Terror attacks are, becoming more often, more frequent, and they have been now for a good few years, haven't they? And it's just given the usual advice that we follow here. I guess it's standardised throughout pretty much the West, if not the world. Run, hide and tell. So what to do, actions on, if something was to happen, and how you're going to actually react. Quite an interesting one on the right here, then page 25, how to stop bleeding. And it's basically just telling you how to save someone's life quickly, and then calling for help. I noticed it doesn't say anything about tourniquets on there, which isn't a bad thing because, tourniquets can damage you if you don't know how to put them on or if you're putting them on inappropriately. But it's talking about basically direct pressure and then basically calling for help. Interesting though that that's on there. And if we go to the next page, we haven't got anything else about first aid whatsoever. It's just about stopping bleeding. I'm surprised they haven't got anything about CPR, but I guess that might be a legal thing. I don't know. Okay, next page then, extreme weather events. So, this is becoming more frequent nowadays. Things like, heavy rain, flooding, snow, and the other end of the scale, extreme heat. And it's just a lot of this is to do with links about going to places to find out information. So we're not just talking about wartime stuff here, we're talking about natural disasters now. So page 27 there on the right, pathogens, infectious diseases, a few comments about that. Okay, coming towards the end now, if you require special assistance. So what's talking about here is people that do need extra help in the event of crisis or war. It was, as it says there, you must still observe emergency preparedness practices, but then, have a little think about how you're going to achieve it as opposed to just someone that's 100% able-bodied. How are you going to do it? Talking to your family and friends and stuff, looking for support, make a crisis emergency plan, all that sort of stuff. Page 29 then, if you have pets, and this might seem like a minor thing, but anyone that owns, dogs, cats, whatever, think about it in reality. If something was to happen, what are you going to do? You're going to abandon, your pet that you love. Some people love their pets more than they love their own people. So it's just a little bit of a reminder that it's not just about yourself and about your partner or your husband or wife. Have a little think about those animals that you love as well. Because imagine if you was bunkered in something because of an incident and your pet had no food. It would be heartbreaking, wouldn't it? And you only had enough food to feed yourself. You'd probably end up starving, giving it all to your bloody dog, wouldn't you? Okay then,
kind of wrapping it up a little bit, if you're worried, so just a little bit of advice there about talking to people, about getting involved. One quite unusual point here then, restrict your news intake. Find a level that works for you. It's all about a balance, isn't it? You know, I think if we become obsessive about what the potential is for things going pear-shaped, and if you listen to all these fear-mongering sites, websites and stuff, then it can drive you around the nuts, drive around the twist, can't it? So yeah, as it says there, find a level that works for you. I think that's a really good bit of advice there. And then below that, talking to children about crisis and war. Now that's going to be, again, a real balance, because what we don't want to be doing is putting everyone's head in the sand and saying everything's going to be all right, because when it goes wrong, it's going to be more of a shock, isn't it? So again, find a level that works with your child. Everyone knows your own kids, your own age, and how they will respond to things. And maybe just, talk to them about sensible stuff and say, we're going to look after you. This is what we've done to try and prevent risks, and this is what we're going to do to prepare for it, so that you're actually reassuring your kids, as opposed to, you don't tell them anything, and then if something goes wrong, they go into panic mode. You can say to them, look, it's okay, we've got this, we're prepared for it, we're good, that sort of thing. On the right then, some information. You've got phone numbers there for emergencies, which everyone should know, but it's maybe just a bit of a reminder about those procedural numbers and information type places. So on below that, you've got the websites that are relevant to Sweden. So a bit of a reference to places you can go to for help or for guidance. And then the last one here then is your actual alarms. So talking about sirens and alarms for the different things. So public service announcement, emergency alarms, air raid warning, that one where shit has gone down, and then an all clear. So quite serious stuff, eh? So that is the end of the pamphlet there, the manual from Sweden that talks about in case of crisis or war.
So that's just a quick run through the new Swedish pamphlet that's been issued to their people, that's going to prepare in times for crisis and war. What do you think? Okay, do you think it's a good idea? Do you think they've gone far enough? Do you think they've covered all the bases? Personally, I think it's not a bad thing, because what it's doing is at least starting the thought process in people's heads, maybe waking a few people up to the fact that there are some real threats out there now, okay? It's not just one, it's several threats, isn't it? So you're talking about your cyber, you're talking about terrorism, you're talking about weather threats, let alone the actual threat of the Russians invading the country or dropping bombs on them and stuff like that. So let me know what you think. Also, what are we doing in this country? Is it enough? Is that Prepare website enough, do you think? Personally, I don't think so. I think there's lots more we could do. And also, it's just been put out there. It's not been sent to people, has it? It's just a case of go and have a look at it if you want. A lot of people won't even know it's there. So again, what I'm going to say is this is not fear-mongering, okay? What I want to do is just get some information out there about what other countries are doing, and comparing it to what's happening in this country. And again, it was a request from several people to kind of have a look at it, highlight some issues and points within that, and just have a discussion, So what points have you got about this? Put them in the comment section below. Have you got any points highlighting what we should be doing? Is it enough, etc.? And as always, more importantly, stay prepared.